Thank you for coming to view the community forum presentation for the St. Joseph Public Schools bond proposal. My apologies that our virtual link was not functional at the community forum, and I hope this presentation will serve to make up for that technology snafu that we had during the forum itself. I'm going to begin by sharing the bond proposal, and then we'll go into the details of the bond itself. The bond proposal for the May 7th ballot is a request for the district to sell $98.5 million of bonds in three chunks or series, one in 2024, one in 2026, and one in 2027. The bond proposal, if passed, would last for 24 years and 10 months, which is fairly typical for a public school bond proposal. And the maximum debt levy that the school district would levy over that time period would be 5.65 mils. It may go lower in that time period, but it will never move above 5.65 mils. And currently we sit at 3.7 mils. So how did we get to the $98.5 million? What was the process that was used? That number is larger than previous bonds, and I want to explain how we came to view that number as the appropriate and responsible ask for this particular bond proposal. But really that study and that investigation of whether we needed a bond proposal and how much began over 2 years ago in 2022, the beginning of 2022, when we engaged our construction partners, Chrisman and Ignite and Pure Architects, to do a complete comprehensive facility assessment of every building in our district. And this was very comprehensive. It took almost a year to come to fruition, and it involved examining every aspect of every facility, from electrical, mechanical, parking lots, furniture, doorways, safety, security, vehicles, everything that the district owns in terms of capital. And they were able to categorize every item in an extensive facility assessment. And they prioritized all those items on a scale from 1 to 5. And 1 being the items in most need of attention, to 5 being not needing attention at this point. And when we got done with that facility assessment in that year, there was over $140 million of immediate needs in the priority 1s and 2s in that facility assessment. We knew that that would be an extensive amount of money to invest into the district at one time, and knew that would 150 million would have to be prioritized again. So we went and looked at all of just the priority 1 needs, which are things that need to be addressed within the next 5 to 10 years. And they are due because of end of life. They need replacement, or they're not ADA compliant, or they're not up to code. And those are things that are included in this bond proposal request. At the same time, the district was going through a year-long process that began in July of 2022 for strategic planning. And that really is a process we went through to gather input from all our different stakeholders, from community members to staff members to students, administration, parents, and families, to really understand what our needs and priorities are, what our vision is for the future. And that strategic plan was fully implemented in July of 2023 and has been serving as our roadmap for the future for at least the next 5 years, if not longer. And that was based on focus groups, community forums, as well as extensive surveying of the community. So between those 2 things, and then 2 additional community forums and an additional surveying of the community related to our this bond, we took all that information, looked at the needs of the district, from the facility assessment to the strategic planning to the bond proposal forums and surveys, and really crafted what we believe is a responsible ask for what the needs of the district are, not for just the immediate needs, but for the next 10 years. And so That combination brought us to the $98.5 million. So it really was a full 2 year extensive and comprehensive process, based on significant community and stakeholder feedback in terms of what needs priorities should be included in that bond proposal. Looking back historically at the different bond proposals over the last 25 years in St. Joseph Public Schools, these three bond proposals, the one in 2001, one in 2010, and one in 2016, are a little different in nature and in structure than the current bond proposal for 98.5 million. And what we saw in the three previous bond proposals was that we were looking at a very narrow focus. In the 2001, the big item that really took up most of that bond was the football stadium and the field house at the high school. And then at the 2010 bond, it was really the look of the high school renovations and that performing arts center at the high school. And then as we moved into the 2016 bond, which is a very small bond, that was strictly instructional technology and our school bus, our transportation. And so those buses were, or excuse me, those bonds were very focused on one or two significant items that could be, if the bond passed, could be accomplished in a short time. In this bond proposal, what we're looking at is a more comprehensive approach to improving the district and meeting the district's infrastructure and capital needs. And so this 98.5 million isn't just a narrow scope to be applied within a short period of time and be done, but it's really dollars that are going to serve for a longer period of time, and they're going to touch every aspect of the district, not just one building, but every single facility in the district, and will have a touch not just for 1, 2, or 3 years, but be used over a 10-year time. And so that's where we see the larger size of the $98.5 million bond today than we saw with the other bonds as well. And what we really want to do in this most recent bond proposal is we're trying to look to be sure that we can improve our infrastructure that's end of life. There's significant work that needs to be done on roofs and mechanical and electrical work that is coming to end of life and needs to be addressed. We want to be sure that all the investments that we've made previously in safety and security are going to be adequately supported with infrastructure technology and updated, because we do have camera systems and door access systems and lockdown systems that are coming to their end of life and need to be refreshed from that standpoint. And then we want to make sure that all our students, no matter where they attend school, whether it be at Lincoln or E.P. Clark or Brown, that they have all of the same opportunities at each of the three elementary schools, so that it doesn't matter whether you attend Brown or you attend Clark or you attend Lincoln, you will have a similar educational and equitable experience at any of the three schools. And then we want to focus on our youngest learners. We know from research that students who attend schooling prior to kindergarten, as young as 3 and 4, are better equipped to be successful in kindergarten and every grade beyond. And we know that they're more successful in terms of graduation, in terms of academic success in school, and as well as in their future earnings. And so we want to make sure that we're preparing our community's youngest learners in the appropriate setting and with the appropriate equipment and curriculum, so that when they come to us in kindergarten, we are ready. They are ready to go and to be successful in that new environment. And that is helping us build the future of our public schools and our students and their future success. Thinking about public schools in Michigan and bonds and millages that public schools have, um, 88% of public schools in Michigan levy debt mills or have bonds in their communities. And the reason that so many school districts do this is because of the way school funding is structured in the state of Michigan. And the state of Michigan collects funding from the residents of Michigan through various means, and those dollars are brought into Lansing and then distributed out to school districts in the form of a per pupil foundation allowance. So each district in this school year receives approximately $9,600 per pupil that's enrolled in the district. And those dollars can be used for operating expenses like the salaries and benefits of our teachers, for textbooks, for curriculum and materials that are used in the classroom. But those dollars cannot be used and are not sufficient to also cover the capital infrastructure needs of districts. So when districts need capital improvements, they are not able to get those dollars from the state of Michigan through that per pupil allocation or other forms from Lansing. Instead, the school funding structure is such that each public school district is responsible for, um, at the local level, for taking care of their capital needs. And how they do that is through bonds and millages. So that's why we see 88% of Michigan public schools have bonds and millages in place right now. The state average of those debt mills across the state is 5.2 debt mills, and St. Joseph sits at 3.7 currently, and if this bond proposal passed, we'd sit at 5.65. So, we're well below average right now, but we'd be slightly above average if the bond were to pass. And again, keep in mind that, dollars gathered from the sale of bonds or bond proposals cannot be used for those salaries and benefits, textbooks, curriculum, cannot be used for operating costs. They can only be used for um, the capital improvements. So from the graph, you can see the dotted line represents 3.7 debt mills, and you can see St. Joseph would fall as the fourth highest on the fourth lowest in the list of schools given here. If the bond were to pass, it would be more in the middle of this particular group of schools that we um, put out across the bond. So you can see that we would go to 5.65, and that would sit us just above Waterville Eats and just below Gull Lake's debt mills. When we talk about the tax impact for the residents of St. Joseph Public Schools who live within the boundaries of the St. Joseph Public Schools, what we look at is the taxable value of one's home. This is different than the market value. The market value is what one might be able to sell their home for. The taxable value is what the local government um, assesses the taxes on. And so if we look at a taxable value home of $100,000, this bond proposal would mean a $195 tax increase for the year for that particular home. When we looked at all the properties within the St. Joseph Public Schools, we found the average taxable value of properties within our school district is $113,244. And that would come out to a $220.82 tax increase over each year if the bond proposal would come into play. And a very simple way to determine what your individual tax impact is to go to our website, sjpsfuture.org, and click on the tax impact heading, which is circled in red on the screen there. And there you can, if you go down to step 2, you can actually punch in your precise address, and it will give you the annual cost and the monthly cost of the particular bond proposal. So I encourage you to do that to get your true cost of what this bond proposal would mean for you in terms of your tax impact. I now want to transition into going more specifically about what's included in our bond proposal. And so, looking on a very broad scope, we have district-wide infrastructure improvements that are including our safety and security, our parking lots, electrical, mechanical, roof replacement, transportation and buses, and some technology to support that infrastructure and the safety and security. We also want to create dedicated spaces for our elementary art, music, and physical education, do some significant renovations to the middle school Because of that building, it was constructed in 1969, and we still have some original um, items in there. And it is a building that hasn't been touched like the high school has, or like some of the elementary building has been touched. And then putting in some additions that are tied into the um, dedicated spaces for art, music, and PE at our elementary schools. We also need to tend to some end of life circumstances around our physical education and our athletic fields, courts, and track and facilities that are outside both our high school and our middle school. And then the bond also includes an early childhood center. So when we kind of break down the bond between the different categories, we really see that 40% of the bond is that infrastructure, that mechanical and electrical, and the roofing, and the aging interior and exteriors of our building. We also um, have dedicated 47% of that 98.5 million to enhancing the learning environments, and that is really about those spaces at our elementary schools, our middle school renovation, um, and the classroom spaces in the early childhood center. And then we have approximately 8% tied up in the physical education athletic amenities in fields and courts at Upton and the high school. And then the last part is safety and security, and that's about 5%. And the reason in previous bonds we've seen that percentage be larger, but we've invested a significant amount of funding into safety and security. We have secure entrances in all of our buildings. We have door barricade systems. We have um, training that we've done to support safety and security. And so what we really need to do is ensure that what we have in place is of a high quality and dependable and reliable. So the safety and security is really about the technology behind the systems that we use for safety and security. So the technology and high quality door access systems and security, our lockdown systems, our public address systems, our signage systems, our lighting, and camera systems. Those are all tied into safety and security and require upgrades in order to ensure that they're operating in a reliable, dependable manner. So, breaking down across the different facilities within our district, we're looking at our three elementary schools are really around 27% of the bond, the work that we want to do there. The middle school is about 24% of the total bond. The high school is about 27%. And that's largely due to that being such a expansive facility, almost 400,000 square feet. And we did do renovations there in 2010, but what we didn't do there is replace the electrical, mechanical systems within the walls and ceilings of that building. And when you have 400,000 square feet, those items add up over time. Another component of the bond, which is just 12% of the bond, is an early childhood center, which I'll talk more about as we come up. And then there's some district-wide projects that include upgrades to our transportation center, which is quite beat down, as well as 3 buses, and some furnishings for classrooms across the whole district. And so there are some district-wide projects as well. So now we're looking more specifically at those district-wide projects. You can see that those include updating the technology related to safety and security, and that's really our data and networking systems, our public address systems, our security cameras, and our door access systems, the flexible classroom furniture, upgrades to our transportation building, and then 3 additional school buses that we would purchase over time and replace buses that we bought in 2016 that will be coming to end of life. Looking specifically at the high school, what we see in the high school area is a lot of electrical, mechanical, and roofing. And so those are things that aren't as visually noticeable as the 2010 bond, but things that were not touched in the 2010 bond. Um, so there are some upgrades to the pool infrastructure, which is at its end of life and deteriorating. We have invested some bond dollars into ensuring the bleachers and putting some waterproofing into our bleachers at our football stadium, and then also improving the ticket entry building into the football stadium, which is an older um, structure that is deteriorating as well. And then it would also involve some parking lot reconfiguration along there. And we'll see that at all the buildings as well. Finally, at the high school, there is going to be upgrades made to the ball fields, both the baseball and softball fields at Dickinson Park. And a couple years ago, received a very generous donation from a community member that will take care of a significant portion of that work. However, the donation didn't quite cover everything that needed to be done in order to ensure a quality upgrade for that facility. And so we are taking a very small portion of the bond, under $1 million, less than $1 million of the 98.5 million, to invest into the ball fields in collaboration with that donation, so that we can bring that vision of the donor to fruition. Moving on to Upton Middle School, this is probably the building that will see the most visual difference if the bond were to be passed and we completed this work. What we see here is the cafeteria is a priority. Right now, the cafeteria is quite small and doesn't facilitate it's not very functional. We have students who are eating at tables, and the line to the kitchen and the cafeteria to get food is winding among the tables where students are eating. And so there needs to be some renovation of that cafeteria area as well. We would be looking at new flooring, doors, and ceiling tiles. A lot of the cabinetry, particularly in the science rooms, is original from 1969. Those need to be replaced. And the life management room is also original, and so we would be looking at renovating that space as well as the science labs from that end. When it comes to the athletic facilities and physical education facilities outside, the track is in need of being replaced, as well as the field itself. The main field is um, kind of filled with pock marks and tends to be not very level. And so some revisions there. The locker room and ticketing facilities are deteriorating and need to be replaced. And so what we're looking at there is moving the soccer field and track further to the east to create room to put the tennis courts, the ticketing, restrooms there, add some additional parking. And then the former tennis courts, which are deteriorating, we would create some staff parking and then redo the flow of traffic in and out of Upton to see if we can improve that process, as we know that is not the most ideal that we have in place currently. The elementary are going to look very similar in concept. And so what we're really trying to do at the elementaries is we want to create dedicated spaces for art, music, and PE, because currently those are in spaces that are not particularly made for those subject areas. The physical education is in the cafeteria, which is basically a multi-purpose room that has basketball hoops. But in all efficiency, it's not a physical education space. In addition, we have significant limitations on when we can schedule physical education. So the kids are very limited because we are running a full breakfast program as well as a full lunch program throughout the day. And that setup and the actual time when students are eating and the takedown probably occupies almost 4 hours of the day. So that leaves a very limited space during which students can participate in physical education. So we're looking at adding a gymnasium to each of the elementary buildings to be able to accommodate that, and then have the cafeteria remain as a cafeteria throughout the school day. And in those few hours when it's not being used, it would be leveraged as a place where we do large group classes can come together, work in there. We do assemblies in there, special events in there, and it's a meeting space as well. So fully leveraging those two spaces. And then we want to be adding, right now we have some young fives classrooms and other classrooms that are in spaces that were not intended to be normal classroom spaces, so because we don't have available space. So in addition to the gym being added on at um, two of the three elementaries, we'd also be adding some classroom to the space so that we can accommodate um, the K the K through 5 classrooms in true classrooms, and then we can have true classrooms for art, music, and PE as well. One of the goals of the gyms is to put the gymnasiums in a space where those could be rented out by community members and community groups in the evening, and that they could access that space without having to go through the school. So we've tried to be cognizant of where we would place those gyms in these preliminary designs so that that could be a possibility. Um, at Brown, you can see that the new classrooms are added on to the classroom wing that's in the center there, and the gym would be on the east side. Oh, I'm sorry, the west side. And we would relocate the playground equipment just further to the east in that case. At Brown, they have a new playground that was recently installed, so we'd just be reusing that playground. But at EP Clark and Lincoln, we would have new playgrounds installed in those areas. At all three buildings, we would be doing a traffic flow study so that we can ensure that um, that we are maximizing and being most efficient with pickup and drop off and ensuring that we have enough parking there. So you can see on this Lincoln drawing an additional staff parking on the east side of the building on the far right there, and new playground equipment as well, and the gymnasium coming on the west side of the building. And keep in mind that these drawings that we're showing you are very conceptual in nature and preliminary designs, and they don't show the intricate details that would come about if the bond were to pass. Upon the bond passing, we would work with our stakeholders, teachers, students, community members, parents, to understand specific details in the design element and the design process. So, for instance, at Lincoln, there would be some reworking of um, the classroom spaces and spaces that are being used as classrooms right now that won't have to be used as classrooms with the additions can be reconfigured so that we can have appropriate spaces for our social workers and for social workers to meet with students and for our speech pathologists to be able to meet with their students as well in more conducive environments for speech and social work and other special services such as that. But those specific details will really be hammered out after the bond passes and in what's called the design process for each of these proposals. The other element that we have included in the bond, which is about 12% of the bond, is an early childhood center. And currently, right now, we have the option to buy a building that sits on Guard Avenue and State Street. It was the former headquarters of the United Federal Credit Union. If the bond passes, we can buy the building. If the bond doesn't pass, we don't have to buy the building. So we are not committed to it 100%. But we would buy the building and we would convert that building so that the bottom floor would be classrooms, and we'd put an addition on the one side of it to be more classrooms, and which is the yellow part on this image. The blue part is the original building. And what we envision is moving our young fives classrooms into the early childhood center here. And that would free up that space at our elementary buildings so that we can accommodate and rework some of the spaces which are ancillary staff, such as social workers and speech teachers, and are currently working out of, and be more conducive to what their needs are and the students' needs are from that end. So with young fives moving over to the early childhood center, we can really create a space that meets their very unique developmental needs, as they are very little and have a different type of curriculum and needs than we see in the K-5 setting. And so this early childhood center would house those young five students. They'd have a playground that would be conducive to their age group that would be installed. And we'd also build out a preschool program. for 3s and 4-year-old children. And we would run that in with a tuition-based program, but in addition, we would also look into offering um, state-funded preschool called Great Start Readiness Program, which which is available as well in our county at different places. So it could be a tuition-based as well as a Great Start Readiness Program for our preschool. In addition to that, when our school the young fives and the preschools aren't in school during the before and after school, we would be able to offer before and after school programming for our K-5 students. So right now, we are unable to have programming for our K-5 students before school and after school. And what the Early Childhood Center would allow us to do is when our preschool programs are over or before they've begun, and as well as the Young Five programs, we can transport our K-5 students who desire such a service to our Early Childhood Center where they can have before school programming or after school programming. That would be on a tuition basis, a cost basis. And on the second floor of that building, we would sell the building the district office is currently housed in on Cleveland Avenue and move our district offices as well as our technology department and workspace over to the Early Childhood Center. And so that would be converted on the second floor for those offices and sit in conjunction with the Young Fives and the preschool programming. Many people ask why we need an early childhood center. An early childhood center is really important so that we can prepare our students as best as we can as they enter our kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and on through 12th grade and graduate. And there's significant amount of research that shows that children who take part in early childhood education tend to be more successful as teenagers and adults. It is shown that they are 25% more likely to graduate from high school, and they're 4 times more likely to earn a bachelor's degree. And then it's shown that they earn higher wages when they do enter the workforce. So there's many positive benefits. What we are excited about is that we could align the curriculum from preschool, 3-year-old, all the way through into kindergarten, so that that transition from preschool to young fives or to kindergarten is as smooth as possible. And our students will come into kindergarten um, fully prepared and accustomed to the St. Joe curriculum and expectations and procedures and processes, and will be hopefully allow them to be more successful as they move through the St. Joseph Public School system. So we think that the Early Childhood Center can really offer the perfect spaces for our youngest learners. They do require a different type of curriculum and different type of classrooms and spaces, particularly a more play-based orientation than a elementary school setting. We know that, as we just talked about, that we prepare our learners for success, not just now, but forever. And it also is supportive of our employees. We want to make sure that our employees have the resources to um, tend to their responsibilities as employers and meet the needs of their students. And sometimes needs for childcare or preschool programming can get in the way of that. And if we can reduce that stress for our employees and provide a resource for them at an early childhood center, that would be helpful to having happy and healthy and committed employees who can do a fantastic job for our students. And then as we see the state of Michigan moving towards what we call universal preschool or free preschool for all, St. Joseph would be very well positioned to be able to take advantage of that opportunity. And that is looking like that could be a possibility in the near future where the state of Michigan is giving school districts funding for each student enrolled in that 4-year-old preschool program. And so we would be well positioned with an early childhood center to be taking advantage of that possible opportunity. Finally, we want to look at the overall construction timeline that this bond proposal would have in place. Unlike the other bond proposals, once the bond passed, the design process happened fairly rapidly. The bids went out and construction began within probably 6 months and was done fairly quickly from that standpoint. Because this bond has that more comprehensive, long term, large scale approach, um, our timeline of construction is going to be spread out over a significantly long period of time, almost into 2029 from 2024. And that's because it's impossible to do that much work locally and have all the labor and construction people to be able to be in place at any one time on so many multiple different sites. And we also have to be very thoughtful and intentional in construction during the school year so we're not interrupting the educational process. And so, working with our construction partners, Chrisman companies, Ignite Design, and Pure Architects, we've developed a very tentative timeline of what this could look like if the bond were to pass. And it staggers out the construction over that 5 year period. And you can see that the 98.5 million in bonds would not be sold all at one time at the beginning. We would sell the first chunk in 2024, another segment in 2026, and another in 2027. And that allows us to make sure we're not borrowing money before we actually need the money, and we're being responsible on that end. So this is a tentative timeline again, and when the bond passes and the design process gets in place and the bids are there, we'd be very looking deeper at whether this is the best plan, but it is the tentative plan at this point in time. And one reason we would start the early childhood center early in this design process is because it would allow us to move the young 5 classrooms out of the elementary buildings into the early childhood center. And that would free up some space for us to be able to move our students around in those elementary schools if we had to do construction in certain areas of the school during the school year. So it would provide some flexibility along that line. Um, so that is the grand scope of the bond. We have an extensive amount of information on our bond website, which can be found at sjpsfuture.org. And that website has extensive information, and I do want to just show you a bit of that. When you go to the website, you can see it's sjpsfuture.org, and the tax impact calculator I was referring to here is at the top, and you can either go to step one, and if you know your taxable value, you can type your taxable value in and see what your tax impact could be. If you don't know your taxable value, you can go to step two and you can add your address in, and it will tell you the tax impact of our bond proposal. And you see some of the similar charts that I showed in the presentation as well. On the proposed investment tab, we have some documents. So you saw my presentation documents that look similar to this. And so all those that you saw in the presentation are also on this website, and you can access those there as well. Get the Facts is a fact sheet that's available at all of our buildings that goes through some of the information that I presented in the presentation also. So that's another aspect. I think one of the best parts of this is the FAQs that's under the More tab. We have a very extensive FAQ center that has well over 100 questions and answers, and they're categorized under different topics. So if you want to learn more about the Early Childhood Center, you can click on Early Childhood Center. If you want to learn more about the history of our bonds and our funding, you can click on this one. We have information on the timeline as well, what the elementary additions would look like, how we developed the bond proposal, and then many people have questions about resident and non-resident enrollment and school of choice, and so there's some information available there, as well as the how to vote, how to get absentee ballots, and some of the voting information. So I strongly encourage you to go back to this website and look at those frequently asked questions from that standpoint, because I think those can be really helpful to everyone. But if you are not a website person and you have other questions or you can't find your answer on that website, I do want you to know that you can always email me, Jenny Fee, the superintendent, and I do want to give you that information that you can do that. So I'm happy to speak with you via telephone. The office number here is 269-926-3100, or you can shoot me an email and I will promptly get back to you with a response. And that number, that email address is jfee@sjschools.org. And that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. And I'm happy to address any questions that you might have and appreciate the time that you've given to listen to this recording. And again, I apologize that our virtual link did not work as intended. That was very disappointing, but I hope you're able to view this presentation and get some of your questions answered, and have a direction of where you can reach out to get additional questions addressed. Thank you very much.